Welcome back to the Abide Project. My name's Pastor Lloyd Hemstreet.
And I'm apparently a sad Canadian hockey fan. Pastor Cam Ugla.
There's a few discussions. Today, we're on Wednesday. The delegates have just broke for dinner break, and apparently there was a hockey game yesterday, and some Canadians aren't as happy with Florida.
You stole our big hockey trophy again. That's how it goes.
That's what they did, apparently.
Been stealing it every year for the last 30-something years now.
Seems like you'd be getting used to it. But anyway, oh, man. All right, so things that have been going on at Synod since our last update. There's been discussion of how much division there should be between our two nations. And so there was an overture that came to Synod this year, not dealing with hockey, dealing with things far more serious and weighty than hockey. But Overture 28 was really the primary discussion of the Tuesday evening session of Synod.
Yeah, and that was jump-started. The overture was submitted by Meadowlands Fellowship Christian Reformed Church. That is the church that actually meets just off the back of the campus here at Redeemer University. And a lot of what they've been suggesting, a lot of what I think has been coming out of there has been that we need to envision two distinct ecclesiastical bodies of Christian Reformed Church. You have the Christian Reformed Church US and the Christian Reformed Church Canada, essentially, is what they were looking for. So there were some debates, some discussions on this. And a lot of this is a lot of stuff, I will say this, that goes back since probably before I was born.
Right. This isn't the first time that this discussion has come up in the denomination at all.
No, certainly not.
However, but it is interesting in this season and this moment. And I think the Synod's response kind of spoke to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Even in the conversation that was had. I
will say that too, that yeah, we've had these discussions at our classes level. I'm a part of Classes Huron. And it just did not seem to be much of an appetite for it. It's hard to separate this issue from other issues that we have discussed recently for a lot of people. And I think that needs to be taken into account as well when we talk about this. And Synod as a body did, I think, in the discussions, take that into account. It started with one of the young adult reps, a young man named Caleb.
Boswell.
Who, he spoke very well about the reality of Pentecost and the fact that because of Pentecost, we come together.
Right. That's what God did by His Spirit.
Yeah.
He brought those from different nations together and made them part of one church.
Yes.
And so if that's what God is doing by His Spirit and that's what we're celebrating together, that sort of started the discussion of why would we divide? What are the issues that we're really facing that would force us to go separate ways?
Yeah, and that I think that was more or less the theme that went through a lot of these discussions as well. One of the pastors who was following along with this, I occasionally checked X while I was looking at this, and Pastor Ben Gressick, who headed up the virtual task force, which we'll talk about in a moment, Ben commented that he by his count, every Canadian classis went up or had a delegate go up to speak, save for two. And the vast majority of them spoke against acceding to this overture, wanting to remain as a unified denomination. We have a lot of things to work out between Canada and the United States. Right. And I'm not talking politically.
Or hockey.
Or even hockey. No, you keep stealing our good players. No, I'm talking about just even in how we do church together and how we do life together. But the goal is not separation here. The goal was unity. And I think that came through a lot. There was a lot of great comments made toward that end. And the vote total that came out, 175 delegates registered their votes.
176 delegates total. 175 of them were registered to vote.
And because Stephen Terpstra is not allowed to vote as president.
Doesn't. Yeah, tie-breaking would be the only case. Yeah. So there were 175 registered.
And 171 of those votes did not accede to this overture. Yeah. It's
three voted for it, and one abstained. And so
I would
171, 3, and 1 were the final vote totals.
So there is a group that's been, I don't want to say pushing, because that really sounds like, we're just driving an agenda here. But there is a group that has really been advocating for more CRC or for more Canadian freedom, and lately that's developed more into, I would say, Canadian autonomy within the CRC. And I don't know that they really grasp the whole of what delegates from Canada were really going for. We're really communicating. Exactly. So
that was the big discussion last night.
That was the lengthy one.
That took up most of the time. The secondary discussion yesterday evening was dealing with Advisory Committee 2B, Overture 7. That was an overture. One of the things that Synod does, they actually did it today, was they are called to vote on all of the board members for all of the different committees of the denomination. And often it's someone that was put forward by classis, so you just have one person for that, and so it's a yes, no, or abstain vote. But there were many delegates in the past who said, I don't know everyone in the denomination. I don't know everyone among the 1,000 churches, U.S. and Canada. We're pretty spread out. And so the overture was asking for, how do we do a better job of thinking about who these people are that are going on our different boards. And so what the advisory committee came back with was not what the overture requested, but they said this is speaking to this need for both oneness and this reality of holiness, and that we want to keep those two things together. And so what the committee put forward and was adopted last night was that we're going to go ahead and ask each of our different agency boards to go ahead and lay out the criteria, what they request, that we're going to specifically have theological questions as part of that, because that's what we're aiming for, the holiness of the church agencies. Yep. And so they're going to make, in the next 12 months, they're going to make whatever criteria they're using public, so that all the delegates of Synod 2026, all the classes will have opportunity to review it, respond if they feel anything's missing or out of place, and all of the bios will include the responses to those specific questions. And so is this going to give us, the delegates to Synod 2026, vast information about all these candidates? No, but it's a step towards that building trust, that preserving the oneness and the holiness of the denomination.
And even just the clarity around it all for delegates, for fellow professors who are going to be watching this. And I'm sure a lot of them will run into each other in the academic circles.
Yep.
But even I think, for prospective students at places like Calvin Theological Seminary.
Yeah. What is the board? What's the response, or what's the expectation for the board that's leading this seminary, this college, this missions agency? So anyway, that's what Synod decided there, and that pretty much wrapped up the work for yesterday. Today we've been making good progress, moving right along. We took up overtures. There were a couple of different majority and minority reports once again, but kind of like I talked about yesterday, these reports are very much on the same page, and what they're asking for, it's just a wisdom question. What is the best way to obtain these sorts of things? So we had a team that was reporting, kind of like a task force, but on the different decisions of Synod. And so they were speaking today, and that brought a majority and minority report.
Yes, and that was one where literally the minority report said, we want to adopt 2/3 of what the majority report said.
Right.
And we just differ here, and
that one even said that that we just want to accede to what the task force team said.
Yep.
And the majority report, the majority of that advisory committee said, really, there's 3 categories here. We should split them into 4 to give a little better distinction and clarity. And so that was what the majority report brought forward. There was a good discussion.
Yep.
And the Synod agreed with and adopted the majority report. And so now we have those categories of what are synodical pronouncements, what's pastoral advice, what's a confessional, a declaration, how do these things kind of rate. And this isn't something that we're looking to use all the time or anything like that. That's not what it's about, but just to have some clarity going forward. Hey, this is the kind of ways that Synod speaks.
And it was intentional too. Committee 3 made sure to say these are broad categories. You're not hopefully, down the road, we're not hopefully going to be spending time parsing out, is this pastoral advice? Is this a synodical pronouncement? Are we going to get into the legalese of all this?
That wasn't the aim or the goal of what the task force put forward, or the team put forward, or what the advisory committee recommended. And so moving on, we talked about Calvin Theological Seminary. They are celebrating, and Synod already kind of got the preemptive jump on celebrating their 150th anniversary next year. But we started out and we recognized that. But in 150 years, some things have changed in our denomination.
You think? Yeah, I know, right?
Just a little bit. And so, there were 22 churches, I think the president, Jewel Medimlick, said of when Calvin Theological Seminary and University, because they were originally together, were formed. And so, they didn't even have a rule that any of their professors had to attend churches, because that just wasn't, everybody was involved in the same 20 churches across the entire denomination, and we were so small and tight-knit. And so they've been working on going back and saying, all right, good governance, we need to take care of some of these responsibilities. One of the things that seminary was not doing was that the professors did not have a covenant for office bearers. No. Again, that was assumed they were in their local church 150 years ago, and so everybody was signed on to the same thing. Well, times have changed, and so they've added that. They talked about to report to the advisory committee, as Sin 24 had asked, hey, how are you working through these things? So now all their tenured professors will be signing on to the covenant for office bearers version for the seminary. But the advisory committee said, well, what about those that aren't tenured professors? What about you have adjuncts working and all of these sorts of things? What is the process around that? They didn't say that we can't have adjuncts. They didn't say that every adjunct to teach something has to be in full alignment in every way. They just want to know, what's the board's plan for these other professors, not just the tenured? How are you going to be looking at and responding to those? And so that is what the request from the advisory committee was, and that was what was passed.
And again, this is, we had a lot of similar discussion, I think, yesterday with this, but that was, of course, the university.
Right.
And this is now, the seminary. So this is a little more focused. And this also goes back to, I think, the aim of what we had talked about last night with Overture 7. We want to get some clarity.
Right.
We want to hear from the board.
Synod has the responsibility of overseeing the denomination and all of these things that fall under Synod's responsibility. And so we want to empower synodical delegates to do that well and live into it well.
And that includes things like CTS.
Other things going on today, we had reports from Reframe Ministries and
Resonate Global Missions.
Resonate Global. Reframe Ministries had a great little video. I'm guessing that it's got to be around somewhere. That was neat. They just ran through their 86 years, I think was the number. 86
Since 1939. So if I'm quick doing the math in my head, that's 87.
Oh, okay. 87 years. So that is the... you got it wrong. 86 years. We got it. Anyway, watch the video. Find it. Look up Resonate, or not Resonate, Reframe Ministries. Look up their site. I'm sure they have that video public, and it was well worth just to see the history of how the CRC has been involved in media ministries from early radio, early TV, all across the globe, and all the work that they continue to do today. That was very, very encouraging as well.
Yeah, it was. And hey, if you can't find it on their website, it was in the live stream.
Right,
so
right. There you go.
And check that.
There you go. Other things that went on, we had the virtual church task force. They went ahead and reported to Synod. I think that was the biggest discussion and debate possibly of Synod. On Overture 28 and dividing the nations and remaining binational, that was a large discussion, but there was obviously a lot of unanimity on that. Virtual church, the reports were not extremely different. It was kind of small differences once again, but it was a wisdom of, do we close the door and keep pursuing it and see if we need to open it later, or do we open the door and see if it needs to be closed later? And opening it only to the extent that each of the churches has to figure out, if you're going to be a church that meets just online, digital church only, how are you fulfilling the marks of a true church? And what is your plan to do such?
Yeah.
And so that was what the majority report requested. The minority report said, we don't think they can get there. They're not going to be able to say that. And so we would encourage all kinds of other use of digital ministry, but just you can't call it a church. And so the debate on that was extensive.
It was lengthy. It was lengthy.
And then we had to cease debate and finally vote. So the final totals on that, for 176 delegates, with 89 is the half, and the vote was 91 to 69 to 2. And so the body was very, very divided. Wisdom which way here, and yet they were both trying to go in 98%, 95% of the same direction.
Yeah,
very similar ways.
Yeah.
So
with that too, it is important, I think, to note how similar these two reports were.
Yeah.
The majority report obviously said let's push the door open, let's allow these churches that are doing these experiments with digital only churches to keep doing them. There was some good comments from the floor as well, and as part of the report about, hey, these churches, when they are doing digital only, as church plants of the various classes that they are in, they do need to provide a ministry plan. They do need to tell people, how are you providing the preaching of the word? How are you providing the sacraments?
And even the majority report said likely they need to be encouraging getting together.
Absolutely.
Because this reality of who we are as human beings, this reality of the creation that God has made us, and this reality of incarnation declares that we need to be together. The church needs to assemble. And so it is a challenging thing. We're on the forefront of technology, it seems, right now. And so there's questions, well, how is this all going to play out into the future? I think that's the majority of what has taken place. That's certainly not answering to everything. And then the other big thing that has taken place is...
It's still going on.
It's still going on. There's an ongoing discussion. One of the things that Resonate reported, that, God's been blessing them in many ways, but with our current reality, there's been large cuts to the finances of Resonate. One of the places that those cuts are appearing is in the church planting grants that Resonate used to be able to provide and does not have the funds for. And so there's a lively discussion that is going to pick up again after dinner, trying to resolve, hey, how is it that we can all affirm church planting and want to see it, but we don't have the funds for it? What direction are we going to go? How can we provide this?
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how this is going to shake out, because we are unified in that room on a lot of things. We want church planting. We want more of it. We want Resonate to be as funded as they can be to do that work. And yet we also are dealing with this reality of, we have lost churches in our denomination. We have lost pastors in our denomination and congregants, which means we've lost ministry share funding, which means Resonate is not getting as much as they need to. There were some people that spoke up with a lot of really good, I think, recommendations for the body, like push your classes, push your church, bring more in for Resonate, bring more in for this.
How do we covenant together and live this out? And so the COD had that discussion in May, and we're seeing that on the floor of Synod too. So next update, Lord willing, we'll be able to tell you how that discussion concludes, and maybe we'll have more ideas of how each of us can get involved too, because the call to the Great Commission is not just for some church planter out there in a different classes, but rather it's for all of God's people and all the church. So,
and then tomorrow as well, they're looking at the just a few large item things to wrap up yet. I don't know if they might start some of that tonight, depending on how long they go.
On how it goes.
They're talking about the banner, of course. There's some churches and classes that would really love us to take a hard look at the banner's mandate. And there's the discussion about the RCA, and will we remain as a church in communion with them? Those are going to be some interesting discussions.
I'm guessing those won't be too short either, most likely.
Absolutely not.
So anyway, we don't know exactly what time the Synod might wrap up, and we have the opportunity to come and let you know how it all concluded, but we're very thankful. Synod's making great progress. The officers have led well, and the body is united in seeking God's kingdom, with just little questions of wisdom of how we can best do that. And so that's where we'll leave the report for today. And Lord willing, we'll wrap it up tomorrow.
Praying you are blessed, and we'll see you then.